Wolverhampton Wanderers are slowly being killed as a football club. The stadium, the atmosphere, the expectation, the standards, the transfer business, the facilities, the off the pitch attitude, and the ownership have all taken a massive, massive hit in recent times. So in this video, we're going to be covering all of those bases and also informing you on my personal opinion on it, looking from the outside, as well as taking a lot of fan opinion into account as well, because I know there's a lot of very, very upset, angry, and quite frankly, disappointed fans in and around the Wolves fan base at the moment. So let's get straight into this one. The ethos and plan for Fosun and Jeffrey Sheet at the head of the club is basically to make Wolves as self-sustainable as possible. Now, that is all well and good. Stability is something that Wolves have struggled with, and many clubs across England have struggled, currently struggle, and will continue to struggle with. I mean, look at Sheffield Wednesday. It's absolutely ludicrous what's going on there. The same with Morecambe. However, in terms of this model for a club that wants to be pushing for things, or apparently, according to the owners and Jeffrey Sheet, what has ambition to get back into Europe and start pushing into the top half of the table again, which yet, remains to be seen, to be quite honest. I think it's really, really concerning for Wolves fans, and I think they have every right to be concerned personally. Now let's start in chronological order and be completely transparent. The first few years of Fosun and She was absolutely brilliant. Wolves managed to do absolutely ridiculously well in the Championship. Came up with one of the best sides we've ever seen. They spent a good amount of money in the Championship as well. And generally was, got it spot on with regards to recruitment and all of that. Then obviously, of course, first season in the Premier League, nailed it, brought some really good players in, managed to then go into European football. The season after, made the likes of Jimenez permanent and stuff like that, and again, European football. And Wolves had so many avenues of income during that time. They had bigger sponsorships, they had Europa League placement money, they had Premier League placement money for finishing higher up in the European places as well. They got to the semi-final of the FA Cup, ultimately losing to Watford, but again, getting far in those cup competitions as well, and generally all was rosy. But ever since the sort of lockdown season and that period, ever since really Nuno was out the club, it's all seemed just absolutely woeful. And I do think even towards the end of Nuno's tenure, you could tell that there was tension there. You could tell he was getting fed up as well, because it felt like that was when they'd stopped backing him. And ever since then, it's been the case with a lot of managers. And some of the managers have been nowhere near good enough. Gary O'Neill, Julian Lopetegui too, that for me were nowhere near good enough at Wolves. And that's my personal opinion. Bruno Lage is one that I think if he would have got a bit more investment, perhaps I think he could have gone on to do something relatively decent. But again, another sort of failure there. And ever since Nuno, really, it has been failure. Now, in terms of on the pitch, the standards are just completely dropping. In terms of league position, massively dropped off the last few years. And also in terms of the actual style of football, the brand of football, and the expectation as well. It feels like, almost, especially this season, I know Wolves fans that are paying £700, £800 for season tickets, nearly £60 a game, to go and watch Matt Doherty play as the right-sided centre-back, or Kiana Herver and Hugo Bueno as the wing-backs as it stands. So that sort of fall from grace is absolutely massive, and something that I don't think should go unnoticed by the wider world. And ever since the investments really stopped, you look at so many players leaving the door that they could have held on to, or could have perhaps got a better fee out of as well. I mean, Ruben Neves, for example, had 1 year left on his contract, £47 million. They could have easily offered him a new contract, just said to him, extend now and then we'll get more money for you and still let you leave. But ultimately, that's not happened. Mateus Cunha, they've given a contract, and they've given him a really low release clause, in my opinion, for a player of his quality. Ryan Aït-Nouri, another one, his contract was running out, and ultimately they haven't got as much money as they could get for him, anywhere near that, in my opinion. Semedo, contract's completely run out as club captain and has left as a free agent. They did offer him a contract though, so that is a bit of a different situation. However, is it all sustainable? Is it always going to be the case? Now, Wolves have, of course, had one or two players every season that have been really, really good. Obviously, last season, Cunha and Aït-Nouri. The season before that, you had Neto and Kilman leave. So there's so many players leaving every window. Obviously, you had Neves. I think it was, in and around that time, there were so many players leaving the club. Now, is that sustainable? Not really. But will it happen again? Most likely, unfortunately. Because the way that Wolves are run sustainably is they make their money from player sales. That's just how it is, and I don't agree with that personally. There's definitely money sitting there. However, it's just not being spent. And also, you have to factor in there was PSR issues as well. But equally, that's not a sustainable model, really. Especially when you say that you're coming out and saying that you've got aspirations to go further, to be better, and it just doesn't look like that for any of the fans attending week in, week out, in my personal opinion. Now, we've discussed Fosun and Shee's role in a lot of the downfall of Wolves in the last few years, but one thing I really want to touch on is the lack of transfer activity currently. Obviously, Wolves have let, I think, 13 go now this window, brought in 2, technically 3 with Strand Larsen, and a few players returned from loans like Silva, Bueno, Herver. And we have spoken a lot about transfers on this channel. But in terms of the window and the role in that, I really do want to break that down, because for me, I think it's frustrating when I see so many people solely blaming Fosun and Jeff Shee on Twitter, because ultimately Domenico Teti has been brought in to do a job, and whether you like it or not, Matt Hobbs had a really good track record at Wolves in terms of recruitment. It really was quite impressive. And when you look at last season, I mean, he bought in Agbadou in that window, and yeah, it was last minute again, but ultimately they identified the right players, bought them in. Manetzi, Agbadou, 2 of the players key in Wolves staying up last season, and ultimately he did his job, whether him and Vitor Pereira got on or not. Now, Domenico Teti's been brought in to do a job, and the transfers fall with him. That's where the book stops with him, and ultimately his job hasn't been done anywhere near as effectively or good enough in my personal opinion. Now, let's be a bit balanced here and a bit fair. I've said it numerous times on this channel. Wolves are shopping in the right markets. They're linked with the right players. They're just unable to get deals done for certain reasons. And I do think they've been unlucky with the players they've been sort of maybe a bit more advanced in negotiations with. So, for example, Marc Pubilla, it looked like he was going to get done. Ultimately, it was hijacked by a club that, one of the biggest clubs in Spain. As a Spanish young right back, you're not going to turn that down. So they're unlucky there. And also the salary will be much higher than Wolves are willing to pay. And then, of course, the likes of Samuel Lino, another one that I know a lot of Wolves fans are frustrated about. But ultimately, a young Brazilian player, he's 25, going from Atletico Madrid to Flamengo, playing for one of the biggest clubs in Brazil, €5 million salary net per year. He's not going to turn that down either. So ultimately, they're in the right markets. However, I was very much of that stance until about a week ago. And I think a week ago is where I've sort of lost the patience, really. And now I'm starting to feel frustrated for all of you Wolves fans, because there's only so much you can say that, there's only so many times you can say I'll reserve my judgment until the end of the window. Ultimately, we need to think about the here and now, don't we? And especially you as Wolves fans, you need to think about the here and now. The performances in pre-season have been uninspiring, to say the least. Especially the game against Lons. We did a breakdown of that on my channel live after the game, and it was just full of negativity, and it unfortunately feels like that at the moment at Wolves. But in terms of the recruitment, Wolves need to start getting numbers through the door. They need to start getting links, more importantly. That's the thing that's concerning me personally as an outsider looking in. And I know it's concerning a lot of you as well, and we've had a lot of discussions about that in my comments. And also under this one, make sure to interact. I'm sure it'll be a very passionate comment section, given the fact that the video is based on those 3 people, Teti, Fosun as a group, and Jeff Shee. So generally, Wolves need to start getting some links, need to start getting some concrete links, putting out some feelers and getting some real players through the door, because ultimately there's 16 days to go until the very first game of the season for Wolves against Manchester City, and the squad, at least the first team, needs at least 4 players, probably 5 to be honest. And then you're looking at depth, and the depth is absolutely crucial. There's been so many players going out, barely any coming in, and it's very, very concerning. I'm excited to see how Jean Arias fares against Girona on Sunday. I'm really excited to see him get a few minutes, and he has travelled with the squad today. But again, concerning. There's also a lot of links to Fabio Silva leaving, Gonzalo Guedes leaving. I think them 2 are probably nailed on to leave, to be honest. Huang and Sasa Kalajic could both leave, and all the links. Even let's not write off Newcastle, to be honest, with Jurgen Strand Larsen as well. But because you never know with the ownership and the way that the club's ran. As I say, they have to sell to buy. That's the way that they've made this club, and the way that the club's almost turned really from what it used to be. And no one's saying they just throw all the money at it, because people around the league would be complaining if they were. But ultimately, Wolves need to do far more in this window and need to get some impressive players through the door, because at the moment it is looking bleak, and I completely echo your frustration in that. Now, I'm sure we'll be receiving Jeff Shee emails. I'm sure we'll be receiving them. I'll put some of them on screen as well if people who haven't seen them, who aren't Wolves fans. They are absolutely incredible. The grammar, first of all, is incredible. Don't be sad, mate. Most Wolves fans will get that. But generally, it's just a really, really worrying time. I do hope that eventually, Fosun are either forced to spend money or are ran out of the club. Equally, I don't think the fan base is doing enough in terms of making noise. Now, obviously, there's a Jeff Shee song and stuff like that. But ultimately, there needs to be sort of protest if fans feel that strongly about it. For me personally, I would, like I say, give it to the end of the window. But I think if it gets to the end of the window and Wolves are in a similar position to where they are now, I think surely protests have got to start happening. Surely a bit more of a ruckus has got to be caused, because ultimately there's only so much that this can continue. You've got quality players sitting there that aren't going to want to stay, and it's been the same every year. I mean, you're telling me a midfield pivot of Andre and João Gomes, who can start for Brazil every single international break, are going to want to stay at Wolverhampton Wanderers, who are fighting relegation every year. Agbadou, who could be one of the best centre-backs in the league, quite comfortably, in my personal opinion, going playing for another side. Yeah, I just don't understand how Wolves can keep a hold of these players. And again, there's still some that need to go, as much as it is concerning with the amount of outgoings. There is still some that need to go. So this is a very passionate video. I'm sure it'll be very passionate in the comments as well, and very passionate across social media, as you'll see from the thumbnail. But generally, it's a really frustrating time to be a Wolverhampton Wanderers fan. I completely take your opinions on that. And I like to think I'm the middleman between having a neutral opinion on it, having my family and friends' opinion on it, having your opinion on it, Wolves friends and sort of colleagues in the industry as well on it, and also generally, my massive opinions of having grown up around the Wolverhampton Wanderers and the noise around the club for the last nearly 23 years. But if you did enjoy this video, I would really appreciate it if you would like it, if you would comment in the comment section, because it helps people see my content. It helps Wolves fans see my content, and we're growing that good community of Wolves fans and Premier League football fans as well. There's 15% of you who watch these videos who are subscribed. The other 85 aren't as well. So I'd very much appreciate it. I really would appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel and achieve that. But thank you very much for watching this video. I really would appreciate it if you would like it, comment and subscribe, as I've said, and I'll see you in the next one.